You've been swimming upstream your entire life, against the current, against time, against the natural rhythm of things. And you're exhausted, not tired, exhausted from trying to force life to happen on your timeline. But here's what the ancient Buddhist masters knew. Life has its own rhythm, an invisible current beneath everything. And the moment you're fighting it, you're suffering. Not because you're weak, because you're human, because you were taught that control equals safety, that pushing equals progress. But there's another way. Hello, friend. I'm so glad you found this. If it feels right, share where you're listening from below, morning, midnight, doesn't matter. I love knowing we're scattered across time zones, all seeking the same truth. Get comfortable, grab that blanket, close your eyes if you want. You don't need to fix anything right now. Just breathe. For the next 3 hours, we're walking a path together. I'm going to share why everything you've forced that didn't work, the relationships, the plans, the doors that stayed closed, might not have been failures. They might have been conditions not yet ripe. Life's wisdom protecting you from what wasn't aligned. We'll explore the invisible rhythm of life, why impermanence is liberation, and how your greatest losses became your deepest teachers. But first, let's talk about why you're so tired. That exhaustion is speaking. Listen. That exhaustion you're carrying, it has a name in Buddhist teaching. It's called suffering born of resistance. You've been pushing against something that was never meant to be pushed. The natural timing of your life, the rhythm that's been here long before you tried to control it. And your body knows. It knows in the tightness of your shoulders at night, in the shallow breathing you don't even notice anymore, in the way your jaw clenches when someone asks how you're doing, in that heaviness in your chest that's been there so long you've started to think it's just part of who you are. But it's not. It's your body whispering what your mind refuses to hear. You're fighting a current that was never your enemy. There's an old teaching about the Chinese bamboo tree. Maybe you've heard versions of it, but let me share it the way it was taught to me. When you plant bamboo seeds, something interesting happens. Nothing. You water the ground. You tend the soil. You wait, and for an entire year, nothing visible emerges. The second year, still nothing. Third year, fourth year, 5 years of watering what looks like empty earth. Most people would have given up by then. Most people would say the seeds were dead, that their effort was wasted, that they should have tried something else. But in the 5th year, something extraordinary happens. The bamboo breaks through the soil and grows 90 feet in just 6 weeks. Now, here's what the Buddhist masters want you to understand. The bamboo wasn't doing nothing for those 5 years. It was developing a root system, a massive, intricate network underground, strong enough to support that 90-foot growth. Without those 5 years of invisible preparation, the rapid growth would be impossible. The bamboo would collapse under its own height. This is how life works. This is what the teaching of anicca, impermanence, is trying to show you. Everything has its season. Everything has conditions that must ripen before manifestation can occur. And your desperate attempts to speed up that process, they're not helping. They're exhausting you. You look at your life and see empty soil. You wonder why nothing is growing, why everyone else seems to be blooming while you're still waiting, why your efforts haven't produced visible results yet. But what if, right now, in this very moment, your roots are deepening? What if everything you've been through, every delay, every closed door, every moment that felt like failure, was actually the soil teaching your roots how to hold strong? The problem isn't that you're late. The problem is that you've been measuring your growth by everyone else's timeline instead of the one that's actually unfolding in your life. Let's talk about what forcing actually does to you. When you force, you're operating from a place the Buddha called tanha, craving. Not the healthy kind of wanting that moves you forward with ease, but the desperate grasping that says, if this doesn't happen now, I am not enough. That's not striving. That's suffering. There's a crucial difference between the two, and this is where the teaching of right effort comes in. Right effort doesn't mean trying harder. It means trying wisely. It means understanding when to act and when to allow, when to plant seeds and when to trust the underground work that you cannot see. Think about how you've been living, the constant mental planning, the strategies and backup strategies, the tight control over every detail, because if you let go for even a moment, something might fall apart. But here's what's actually falling apart. You. Your nervous system wasn't designed to operate in constant override mode. When you push past your body's signals, when you ignore the exhaustion and keep grinding, when you treat rest as laziness and patience as weakness, you're not winning. You're fragmenting. The body becomes tense. Sleep becomes difficult. Joy becomes rare. And that voice inside that used to guide you, it gets quieter and quieter until you can't hear it anymore. This is what forcing does. It disconnects you from your own inner wisdom. The Buddha taught something profound that speaks directly to this moment. Do not dwell in the past. Do not dream of the future. Concentrate the mind on the present moment. But we've misunderstood this teaching. We think it means we shouldn't plan or hope. That's not it at all. What the Buddha was pointing to is this: your suffering isn't happening in the present moment. It's happening in your mind's story about the present moment. Right now, in this exact second, Are you actually suffering? Or are you suffering because you're thinking about how things should be different, how you should be further along, how this should have happened already? The present moment, just this breath, just this heartbeat, is usually bearable. Sometimes it's even beautiful. It's when your mind jumps to, "But what about tomorrow?" or "Why didn't it happen yesterday?" that the suffering floods in. And that's where the false urgency lives. Your mind, brilliant and protective as it is, operates with ancient wiring. It's designed to keep you safe, to scan for threats, to prepare for danger. This was useful when survival meant outrunning predators. But now, that same mechanism creates urgency where none exists. It tells you that if you don't achieve this goal by 30, you've failed. If you don't find love by a certain age, you'll be alone forever. If you don't succeed according to someone else's timeline, you're behind. None of this is true. But it feels true because your nervous system is in survival mode, treating your natural life unfolding as if it were a threat to your existence. And so, you push, you force, you exhaust yourself, trying to outrun a timeline that was never real to begin with. Let me tell you about seeds. Have you ever seen a seed panic? Have you ever watched a seed in the ground, desperate and anxious, trying to bloom before it's ready? No, because seeds are wise in a way we've forgotten how to be. A seed doesn't rush. It doesn't compare itself to the flower next to it. It doesn't worry that it's taking too long or that it should be further along by now. It simply responds to conditions. When there's enough water, enough warmth, enough darkness to feel safe, enough light to reach toward, then, and only then, does it begin to open. Not a moment sooner. Not because it's lazy, not because it's afraid, but because premature blooming would mean death. The seed knows something essential. Timing isn't arbitrary. It's intelligent. When you bloom before your roots are deep, you cannot sustain the growth. When you force the opening before conditions are right, you damage the very thing you're trying to create. This is anicca, in action, the teaching of impermanence. Everything arises according to causes and conditions. Everything has its moment of ripening. And your job isn't to make it happen faster. Your job is to tend the conditions and trust the process. But we don't trust it, do we? We've been taught that trust is naive, that patience is passive, that if we're not constantly doing, pushing, forcing, we're falling behind. So we override our own timing. We ignore the signs that say, "Not yet." We push through exhaustion as if it were just an obstacle instead of information. And here's what I want you to notice right now, in this moment. How tired are you? Not the kind of tired that sleep fixes, but the deep tiredness that lives in your bones, the exhaustion that makes you wonder if you'll ever feel light again. That exhaustion, it's information. It's your body saying, this pace is not sustainable. This force is not natural. This timeline you're trying to meet is breaking you. And the most compassionate thing you can do, the most revolutionary thing you can do in a world that tells you to hustle harder, is to listen. To stop. To breathe. To acknowledge that maybe, just maybe, your life is unfolding exactly as it needs to, even if it doesn't match the picture you had in your mind. The Buddhist teaching of the middle way is relevant here. It's the path between two extremes, between forcing and giving up, between striving and collapsing, between controlling and abandoning. The middle way says, engage with your life, yes. Plant your seeds, yes. Water your garden, yes. But then, and this is the part we forget, step back and let conditions ripen. You cannot force a flower to bloom by pulling on its petals. You cannot make bamboo grow faster by yelling at the soil. You cannot rush your life into happening before its time without damaging the very thing you're trying to create. So, what do you do instead? You learn to distinguish between productive action and desperate forcing. You learn to feel the difference in your body. One feels like flow, even when it's challenging. The other feels like friction, like swimming against a current that never ends. You learn to recognize when your efforts are coming from trust and when they're coming from fear. Because actions born from trust move forward with a certain ease, even through difficulty. But actions born from fear feel heavy, desperate, exhausting. And you learn, slowly, gently, with great patience toward yourself, to trust that your life has its own intelligence, that there's a rhythm beneath everything, guiding, unfolding, ripening. Not because some external force is controlling your destiny, but because everything arises from conditions, and conditions take time to align. Your roots are growing right now, even if you can't see them. Your seeds are preparing to bloom, even if the soil still looks empty. And your timeline, your real timeline, not the one society handed you, is unfolding with perfect precision. You are not late. You are not behind. You are exactly where the conditions of your life have brought you. And from here, with patience, with presence, with trust in the natural rhythm of things, everything you've been forcing can finally begin to flow. But here's what nobody tells you about waiting. There's a sacred difference between patience and passivity. And understanding this changes everything. Stay with me. There's a feeling you know intimately, even if you've never named it. It's that sense that something should be happening right now, that you're supposed to be somewhere other than where you are. That time is running out and you're standing still while everyone else is moving forward. It's not quite anxiety, though it lives in the same neighborhood. It's not quite fear, though it tastes similar. It's restlessness, a low hum of urgency that never quite turns off. The Buddha had a word for this. He called it dukkha, often translated as suffering, but more accurately understood as a deep unsatisfactoriness, a persistent sense that something is not quite right. And here's what the teaching wants you to understand. This restlessness you feel, it's not a personal failing. It's not evidence that something is wrong with you. It's actually the mind doing exactly what an unobserved mind does. It creates urgency where none exists. Your mind is brilliant at this. It takes the natural unfolding of your life and turns it into a crisis. It takes a moment of stillness and fills it with 1,000 questions about whether you should be doing something else, being somewhere else, achieving something more. But what if you're not actually late? What if this feeling of being behind, this constant sense that life is happening somewhere else and you're missing it, what if that's just the mind's misunderstanding of how life actually works? See, the mind doesn't know how to wait. It wasn't designed for patience. It was designed to solve problems, to anticipate threats, to keep you safe by always scanning for what's next. And in a world where survival meant constant vigilance, this was useful. But now that same mechanism takes the natural pauses in your life, the periods of preparation, the seasons of rest, the necessary stillness before growth, and labels them as danger. Your mind whispers, if nothing is happening, something must be wrong. But that's not truth. That's just an ancient alarm system that doesn't know the difference between actual danger and the peaceful groundwork that precedes every meaningful change. There's a story about a young monk who came to the Buddha with this exact restlessness. The monk bowed deeply and asked, "Teacher, when will I be enlightened?" He expected wisdom, perhaps a teaching, maybe a timeline. Instead, the Buddha simply pointed to a tree nearby. The monk looked at the tree, confused. It was just a tree, leaves moving gently in the wind, roots deep in the earth, branches reaching toward the sky. "I don't understand," the monk said. The Buddha smiled. "Does the tree ask when it will be complete?" The monk stood there, the question hanging in the air between them. "The tree grows according to conditions," the Buddha continued. "Rain comes, the tree drinks. Sun shines, the tree reaches. Winter arrives, the tree rests. It does not ask if it is ready. It does not wonder if it is behind schedule. It simply responds to what is present, moment by moment." Your enlightenment is the same. It unfolds according to conditions. Your practice, your understanding, your readiness. Asking when is like asking the tree to bloom before spring arrives. The question itself reveals the obstacle. This is what restlessness really is. It's the gap between what your mind expects and what reality is offering right now. It's the space between I should be here and I am here. And that gap, that space of misalignment, creates the suffering of urgency. The Buddhist teachings identify restlessness as one of the 5 hindrances, one of the mental states that obscures clear seeing. Not because restlessness is bad, but because it prevents you from being present with what actually is. When your mind is racing ahead, when you're constantly checking whether you're on track, whether you're enough, whether you're where you should be, you cannot possibly see clearly what this moment is offering. You're too busy arguing with reality to actually experience it. And here's the paradox. The thing you're rushing toward, you'll never arrive if you can't be present for the steps that take you there. Think about the last time you felt truly at peace. I'm willing to bet it wasn't because everything in your life was perfect. It wasn't because you had finally achieved every goal or checked every box. It was probably a moment when you stopped checking, when you stopped measuring, when you were simply here, breathing, present, not needing anything to be different than it was. That's the wisdom living inside not yet. Not yet doesn't mean never. It means the conditions haven't fully ripened. It means there's still groundwork happening beneath the surface. It means your roots are still deepening in ways you cannot see. But the restless mind hears not yet and translates it as rejection, as evidence of unworthiness, as proof that you're failing. And so the anxiety grows. Let me tell you what I've learned about the difference between anxiety and intuition, because this is where so many of us get confused. Anxiety lives in the future. It spins stories about all the terrible things that might happen, all the ways you might fail, all the opportunities you might miss. It's loud, urgent, insistent. It demands immediate action, even when there's nothing useful to do right now. Anxiety feels like drowning in questions that have no answers yet. Intuition, on the other hand, lives in the present. It's quiet, calm, clear. It doesn't scream at you to do something. It gently suggests a direction. It doesn't create panic. It creates a sense of knowing, even when you can't explain why. Intuition feels like coming home to something true. When you're anxious, your body contracts, shoulders tight, breath shallow, chest constricted. When you're following intuition, your body opens. Even if the path ahead is uncertain, there's a quality of rightness that the body recognizes. The restless mind, caught in anxiety, cannot hear intuition. It's too noisy, too desperate, too convinced that something terrible will happen if you don't figure everything out right now. But here's what the Buddha taught, and it's as relevant today as it was 2,500 years ago. Nothing can harm you as much as your own thoughts unguarded. Not the circumstances of your life, not the timing of your goals, not the judgment of others. Your own unexamined thoughts, running wild, creating urgency, spinning catastrophe, measuring and comparing and finding you lacking, those are what create the deepest suffering. And the antidote isn't to force the thoughts to stop. It's to become aware of them, to watch them without believing every story they tell. There was a time in my own life when the restlessness was so consuming I could barely breathe through it. Every morning I would wake up with a tight knot in my chest, this immediate sense that I was behind, that I had already wasted time by sleeping, that everyone else was moving forward while I was stuck. I remember one particular morning, sitting on the edge of my bed, feeling that familiar panic rising, and instead of doing what I usually did, jumping up, making lists, trying to outrun the feeling, I just sat there. I placed my hand on my chest and felt my heart racing. I noticed how shallow my breath had become. I observed the thoughts racing through my mind. You should have done this by now. Everyone else is further ahead. You're running out of time. What's wrong with you? And then I asked myself a simple question. Is any of that true in this exact moment? In that moment, I was sitting on a bed. The morning light was coming through the window. I was breathing. I was alive. Nothing terrible was actually happening. The suffering was entirely in my mind's story about what should be happening instead. That's when I started learning about awareness of mental states, not as a concept, but as a practice. The Buddhist teaching of mindfulness isn't about clearing your mind or stopping your thoughts. It's about becoming aware of what your mind is doing, so you can choose whether to believe it. You start to notice, there's the story about being behind. There's the comparison to others. There's the urgency that has no basis in present reality. And in that noticing, something shifts. The thoughts don't necessarily stop, but they lose their grip on you. You can see them as what they are, mental phenomena, not absolute truth. This is what it means to observe without judging, not to condemn yourself for having restless thoughts, but to simply see them clearly. This is what the mind does when it feels uncertain. This is the pattern it runs when it's afraid. And then, and this is the crucial part, you bring yourself back to your breath. Not as a technique to fix anything, but as a way of returning to what's real. Your breath is always happening now, not in the future you're worried about, not in the past you're regretting. Right here, right now. One breath in, one breath out. And in that simple return, you're practicing the art of being present, even when your mind wants to be anywhere else. This doesn't mean the restlessness disappears forever. It means you start to recognize it when it arrives. And you know you don't have to believe everything it tells you. You learn that your worth is not measured by your timeline. You learn that your value is not determined by how much you've achieved by a certain age, or whether you're keeping pace with people who are on completely different paths with completely different conditions. You are not behind. You are not failing. You are exactly where decades of causes and conditions have brought you. And from here, with awareness and patience, you can move forward with clarity instead of panic. The restlessness wants you to believe that if you just push harder, achieve faster, become more, then you'll finally be allowed to rest. But that's backwards. Rest isn't the reward for completing everything. Rest is the foundation that allows you to see clearly what actually needs to be done. When you pause, truly pause, not just in body, but in mind, you create space for wisdom to arise, for intuition to speak, for the truth beneath the urgency to reveal itself. And often, what reveals itself is this: the urgency was never real. There is no cosmic deadline you're racing toward. There is no ultimate judge tallying up whether you hit arbitrary milestones on time. There is only this moment, and what you choose to do with your awareness right now. Will you let the restless mind convince you that you're always behind? Or will you bring gentle awareness to that pattern and choose, even for just this one breath, to be here instead? The mind won't stop creating urgency overnight. This is lifelong practice. But each time you notice the restlessness and choose not to believe it, you're training yourself in a different way of being. A way that's grounded in presence instead of panic. A way that trusts the unfolding instead of trying to force it. And slowly, over time, the restlessness begins to quiet. Not because everything in your life is suddenly perfect, but because you've stopped requiring it to be. You've learned to sit with "not yet" without making it mean you're not enough. You've learned to feel the urgency without letting it dictate your actions. You've learned that your mind will always have opinions about where you should be, but you don't have to live according to those opinions. You can live according to what's true instead. Now, I want to share something that might feel counterintuitive at first. It's about why letting go actually creates more space than holding on. And there's ancient wisdom, thousands of years old, that proves this. Everything you've ever loved will change. Everyone you know will leave, one way or another, through death, distance, or the simple evolution of who people become over time. Every possession you own will break, decay, or pass into someone else's hands. Every version of yourself that you've been is already gone, replaced by who you are now, who will be replaced by who you become next. This isn't pessimism. This is the first and most fundamental truth the Buddha taught. Anicca, impermanence. All conditioned things, everything that arises from causes and conditions, are in constant flux. Nothing stays. Nothing remains fixed. Change is not the exception to the rule of existence. Change is the rule. And here's where it gets interesting. Your suffering doesn't come from change itself. It comes from your resistance to change, from your desperate attempt to make permanent what was always, by its very nature, temporary. This is dukkha, the second mark of existence. Suffering arises from clinging to what must change. You cling to relationships, hoping they'll stay exactly as they are. You cling to youth, to health, to circumstances that feel good. You cling to ideas about how your life should unfold, to timelines you've created, to versions of yourself you think you should be. And every time reality reminds you that nothing stays, you experience that as loss, as failure, as something going wrong. But what if nothing is going wrong? What if change is exactly what's supposed to happen, and your suffering comes not from the change, but from your belief that it shouldn't be changing? There's a teaching story about a wise teacher who had a clay cup he loved dearly. He drank his tea from it every morning. He admired its simple beauty, the way it fit perfectly in his hands, the smooth glaze that caught the light just so. One day, a student noticed how carefully the teacher handled this cup and asked, "Teacher, you clearly love this cup. What will you do when it breaks?" The teacher smiled and said something that changed the student's understanding forever. "It's already broken," he said. "I'm just enjoying it now." The student was confused. "But teacher, the cup is whole. It's not broken." "It will break," the teacher said gently. "All things do. Clay returns to earth. This cup, this body, this life, all of it is temporary. So rather than pretend it will last forever and then suffer when it breaks, I acknowledge its nature now. It's already broken. It's already returning to what it came from. And because I see this clearly, I can truly appreciate it while it's here. No clinging, no denial, just presence with what is for as long as it lasts." This is the wisdom of impermanence. When you understand that everything is already in the process of changing, already moving toward its next form, you stop trying to freeze it in place. You stop exhausting yourself, trying to make permanent what was never meant to be permanent. And something unexpected happens. You become free to actually enjoy what's here. Because you're not spending your energy trying to control the uncontrollable. You're not lost in anxiety about losing what you have. You're simply here, present, aware that this moment is precious, precisely because it won't last. Now, I know what some part of you might be thinking. This sounds hopeless. If nothing lasts, what's the point? But that's not what this teaching is pointing to at all. This isn't nihilism. This is liberation. When you deeply understand impermanence, you stop relating to life as something you possess. You start relating to it as something you participate in. Nothing truly belongs to you, not your body. It's changing every moment. Cells dying and being born, aging according to conditions you don't control. Not your relationships. People grow, evolve, sometimes grow apart. Not your thoughts or emotions. They arise and pass like weather systems moving through. You are not the owner of any of this. You are the temporary caretaker. And when you stop trying to own what cannot be owned, the burden lifts. This is anatta, the third mark of existence, non-self, the teaching that there is no fixed, permanent, unchanging self at the core of your being. You are not a solid, static thing. You are a process, a constantly changing flow of experiences, conditions, causes, and effects arising and passing away. And once you see this clearly, not just intellectually, but in your direct experience, something fundamental shifts. You stop trying to hold water in your fists. Have you ever tried it? Scooping water from a river or a pool and trying to keep it in your closed hands. The tighter you squeeze, the faster it leaks out between your fingers. The more desperate you are to hold on, the more certainly you lose what you're trying to keep. But if you relax your hands, if you let them rest open in the water stays as long as it stays. And when it flows away, it flows. No suffering, no loss, just the natural movement of things. This is what letting go looks like. Not abandoning everything you care about, not becoming cold or detached, but learning to hold your life with open hands instead of clenched fists. The Buddha taught something else that's crucial to understanding this: dependent origination. It's one of the most profound teachings in Buddhism, and it completely shifts how you see your life. Everything that exists arises from causes and conditions. Nothing happens in isolation. Nothing is independent. This moment you're in right now, it didn't happen to you by some cosmic design or universal will. It arose from countless conditions meeting in this exact way. Your past actions, yes, but also your parents' choices, their parents' choices, historical events, cultural conditioning, random chance, other people's decisions, environmental factors, biological processes, and on, an infinite web of interconnected causes. You are not separate from this web. You are one strand in it, affecting and being affected by everything else. And this means that what happens in your life isn't personal judgment or cosmic reward or punishment. It's simply conditions ripening. When you understand this, you stop taking everything so personally. You stop asking, "Why is this happening to me?" as if you were singled out. Instead, you start asking, "What conditions led to this? And What can I learn from this? And how do I respond with wisdom? This shift from victim to participant changes everything. Because if your life is arising from conditions, then you have agency in shaping those conditions going forward. Not total control, that's the illusion that creates suffering, but influence, choice, the ability to plant seeds that will grow into different outcomes. But you cannot control when those seeds will sprout. You cannot force the conditions to ripen faster. You can only do your part and then let go, trusting that the natural process of cause and effect will unfold as it unfolds. This is where the teaching of upadana becomes important. Upadana means clinging or grasping. It's the tight fist around the water, the desperate need to control outcomes, the refusal to accept that things change. And the Buddha was very clear. Upadana is the root of suffering. Not wanting things. Wanting is natural, but clinging to things, demanding they stay exactly as they are, refusing to accept their impermanent nature, that's where the pain lives. When you cling to a relationship, you suffocate it. When you cling to youth, you miss the wisdom of aging. When you cling to one version of yourself, you prevent growth. When you cling to how things should be, you cannot respond skillfully to how things actually are. Letting go, then, is not a loss. It's an alignment with reality. It's saying, I understand that this will change. I understand that I cannot freeze this moment forever. So I will be fully present with it now, loving it now, appreciating it now, without demanding that it stay. And here's the paradox. When you stop clinging, you actually experience things more deeply. Because you're not distant and defended, already grieving the loss before the thing is even gone. You're here, open, available, letting life touch you fully, because you've made peace with its temporary nature. Your breath is teaching you this in every moment, if you pay attention. Breathe in. The inhale arrives. It fills your lungs. And then, without you having to force it, without you having to grieve it, it ends. The exhale begins. It leaves your body, and then it too ends, making space for the next inhale. You don't cling to the inhale and refuse to let it go. You don't panic when the exhale leaves, wondering if another breath will come. You trust the natural rhythm of arising and passing, over and over, sustaining your life precisely because you don't try to control it. This is how all of life works. Inhale, exhale, arrive, depart, begin, end, birth, death. Not tragedy, just truth. And when you align yourself with this truth instead of fighting it, something releases in you. The tension eases, the panic subsides, the constant low-grade anxiety about losing what you have begins to dissolve. because you're no longer trying to do the impossible. You're no longer trying to make permanent what is, by nature, impermanent. You're simply here, breathing, present with what is, for as long as it lasts. The Buddha said, "All conditioned things are impermanent." When one sees this with wisdom, one turns away from suffering. Not turns away from life, turns away from suffering. Because suffering comes from the misunderstanding that things should stay when their nature is to change. And wisdom comes from seeing clearly, this will change, and that's not a problem to be solved. That's just how it is. When you see this, really see it, not just think about it, you stop relating to change as the enemy. You stop seeing every ending as a personal failure. You stop treating loss as evidence that something went wrong. Instead, you begin to see change as the very fabric of existence, loss as the inevitable counterpart to having, endings as the necessary completion that makes space for new beginnings. And here's the gentle truth that might bring you some peace right now. Impermanence means your pain won't last either. Whatever you're struggling with, whatever weight you're carrying, whatever suffering feels permanent in this moment, it too is subject to change. It too will shift, evolve, transform, and eventually pass. Nothing stays. Not the good, not the bad, not the neutral. Everything is moving, always, toward its next form. So when you find yourself clinging, and you will, because you're human, and clinging is what the untrained mind does, can you notice it? Can you feel the tightness in your chest, the grasping in your thoughts, the refusal to accept what's changing? And then, with great gentleness toward yourself, can you soften? Can you take one breath and remind yourself, this too is changing. This too will pass. I don't have to hold so tightly. Not because you don't care, but because you understand that holding tightly doesn't stop the change. It only exhausts you. Letting go is not giving up. It's not indifference. It's not coldness. It's wisdom. It's alignment with how things actually are. It's the relief that comes when you stop fighting a battle you could never win, the battle against change itself. And when you release that futile fight, you discover something beautiful. You have so much more energy for what actually matters. For being present, for loving without strangling, for appreciating without possessing, for participating fully in this temporary, precious, ever-changing dance of existence. The clay cup is already broken. Your life is already changing. Everything you love is already in motion toward its next form. This isn't cause for despair. This is your invitation to be fully alive right now, in this moment, with what's actually here, not with your fantasy of forever, but with the reality of now. And now is enough. It always has been. Understanding impermanence is one thing, but living with it, that requires learning the art of non-resistance. Let me show you what I mean. There's a sensation you know intimately, though you might not have named it yet. It's the feeling of swimming upstream, every stroke harder than it should be, your muscles burning, your breath ragged, the shore never getting closer, no matter how hard you push. That's what resistance feels like in the body. And if you're honest with yourself, you've been swimming upstream for a long time. Against circumstances you didn't choose. Against timing that feels wrong. Against reality itself. Arguing with what is. Insisting it should be different. Better. Easier. Faster. The Buddha had a specific word for this kind of resistance. Tanha. It's often translated as craving or thirst, but it's deeper than just wanting things. Tanha is the desperate grasping, the refusal to accept what's actually here, the constant push against reality because it doesn't match your expectations. And the Buddha was clear. Tanha is the root cause of all suffering. Not the circumstances themselves, not what happens to you, but your relationship to what happens, the resistance, the fighting, the refusal to accept that this is what is. Your body knows when you're resisting. It shows up as tension in your shoulders, like you're bracing against an invisible blow that never comes. As tightness in your jaw from clenching against words you can't say, or realities you don't want to face. It shows up as exhaustion that sleep doesn't fix, because the tiredness isn't from physical exertion. It's from the constant internal battle, the unceasing argument with how things are. It shows up as disconnect, that feeling of being absent from your own life, watching from behind glass, unable to fully land in any moment, because part of you is always somewhere else, wishing things were different. Notice that right now, if you can, where in your body are you holding tension? Where are you tight, braced, defended? That's not random. That's the physical manifestation of resistance. That's your body showing you where you're fighting reality instead of flowing with it. When you fight what is, you're not fighting circumstances. You're fighting truth itself. Because what is. It's already happened. It's already here. Your resistance to it doesn't change it. It only creates a layer of suffering on top of whatever you're already experiencing. This is the core of the Buddha's insight. Suffering is not what happens to you. Suffering is your relationship to what happens. Pain is inevitable. Bodies age. People leave. Plans fail. Loss comes. That's the nature of existence in an impermanent world. But suffering, the deep anguish, the prolonged struggle, the sense that this shouldn't be happening, that's optional. That's what you add when you resist. There's an old story, borrowed from Taoist teachings, but often shared in Zen circles, about two trees in a forest. One is an oak, strong, solid, proud. The other is a willow, flexible, yielding, gentle. A massive storm approaches, the kind that tears through the forest with winds so fierce they sound like the earth itself is screaming. The oak stands firm. It refuses to bend. Its roots dig deep. Its trunk hardens. Its branches lock in place. "I will not yield," the oak seems to say. "I am strong enough to withstand this." The willow, on the other hand, bends. When the wind pushes, the willow bows. When the storm rages, the willow's branches sweep the ground. It offers no resistance, creates no opposition, simply moves with the force that's already present. When morning comes and the storm passes, the oak has split down the middle. Its strength, its rigidity, its refusal to yield, these things broke it. The willow stands whole, perhaps a bit windswept, but alive and intact. This is not a story about weakness versus strength. It's a story about wisdom versus resistance. The oak didn't fall because it was weak. It fell because it couldn't accept that the storm was stronger, that resistance in that moment was futile, that survival required flexibility instead of force. How many storms have you tried to resist when what was needed was to bend? How many times have you stood rigid against change, insisting on your way, your timeline, your vision of how things should be, only to find yourself broken by forces you could never control? When you argue with reality, something in you goes quiet. Your inner knowing, that deep place of wisdom and clarity, stops speaking. Because how can wisdom arise when you're too busy shouting at what is? That quiet isn't peace. It's disconnection. It's the silence that comes when you've severed yourself from truth, because truth is too uncomfortable to face. And the suffering that comes from this disconnection is specific, isn't it? It sounds like, this shouldn't be happening. This shouldn't be happening to me. This isn't fair. This isn't what I worked for. This isn't what I deserve. Every version of that sentence is resistance. Every iteration is you standing in the storm like the oak, demanding that the wind stop blowing. But the wind doesn't care about should. Reality doesn't bend to your sense of fairness. What is, regardless of whether you think it should be. And the moment you can shift from this shouldn't be happening to this is happening and I can respond, that's the moment suffering begins to ease. Not because the circumstances have changed, but because you've stopped adding resistance to difficulty. This is where people misunderstand the Buddhist teaching of acceptance. They think acceptance means resignation, giving up, becoming passive in the face of injustice or hardship. But that's not what acceptance means at all. Acceptance is simply acknowledging what is true right now. It's the willingness to say, okay, this is where I am. I didn't choose it. I don't like it. But this is what's real in this moment. From that place of acceptance, you can act. You can respond. You can make choices about what to do next. But from resistance, from the place of, this shouldn't be, you're stuck. You're spinning in outrage and disbelief, using all your energy to fight what's already happened, instead of working with what actually is. The teaching of the middle way speaks to this directly. The Buddha taught that wisdom lives between two extremes, not in forcing yourself against reality, and not in collapsing into helplessness. Not like the oak, rigid and breaking, not like a tree that just falls over at the first gust of wind. Like the willow, flexible, responsive, bending without breaking, moving with what is, while maintaining its essential nature. This is right effort, samavayama, in the Buddha's original teaching. Right effort doesn't mean maximum effort. It means appropriate effort, wise effort, effort that's aligned with reality instead of opposed to it. You still act. You still engage with your life. You still work toward what matters to you. But you do so with an understanding of what you can actually influence and what you need to accept. You learn to tell the difference between a door that's locked and needs the right key and a door that's locked because it's not meant for you to enter. You learn to recognize when you're pushing against something that needs pushing, where your effort can create change, and when you're pushing against the immovable, exhausting yourself for nothing. Think about trying to hold sand in your closed fists. The tighter you squeeze, trying to keep every grain from escaping, the faster it pours out through the cracks between your fingers. You can feel the panic rising as you try to hold tighter, close your fists more, somehow contain what's slipping away. But it doesn't work. The sand doesn't care about your desperation. It follows its nature, finding every opening, flowing toward the ground. And you're left with bleeding palms from the pressure, arms shaking from the effort, and almost no sand remaining despite all that struggle. Now imagine holding that same sand in open, relaxed hands. Some of it will fall away. That's inevitable. That's the nature of sand. But what remains sits comfortably in your palms. No strain, no desperation, no suffering. You can carry it as far as you need to. You can appreciate it while it's there. And when it eventually flows away, as it must, you haven't hurt yourself trying to prevent the inevitable. This is the difference between resistance and flow. Flow doesn't mean you don't care. It doesn't mean you're passive or indifferent. It means you're working with reality instead of against it. You're like water moving around rocks instead of trying to push straight through them. Water doesn't argue with obstacles. It doesn't waste energy insisting that rocks shouldn't be there. It simply finds the path that's open and flows through it. And eventually, given enough time, water shapes even the hardest stone, not through force, but through persistent, gentle presence. This is what acceptance makes possible. When you stop fighting reality, you don't lose your power to create change. You actually gain it because you're no longer wasting energy on futile battles. You're directing your effort where it can actually make a difference. Acceptance is not the end of change. It's the beginning of wise change. It's the moment you stop trying to force the river to run uphill and instead work with its natural flow to get where you need to go. Inner peace, then, becomes possible not when your circumstances are perfect, but when you stop demanding that they be perfect before you allow yourself to rest. Peace is the choice to stop fighting, not to stop caring, not to stop acting, but to stop the internal war that exhausts you and changes nothing. And here's what's beautiful about this shift. The moment you stop resisting, you often discover that what you were fighting against was trying to help you all along. The closed door that felt like rejection was actually protection from something that would have harmed you. The delay that felt like punishment was actually time for conditions to ripen that you couldn't see yet. The loss that felt like the end was actually space being cleared for something more aligned with who you're becoming. Reality is not your enemy. It never was. But when you're in resistance, you can't see that. You can only see what you're fighting against, not what you might be fighting toward. There's an ally hidden in what is, but you'll never find it while you're busy, insisting that what is should be something else. I know this is hard to hear, especially if you're in the middle of something painful right now. I'm not suggesting that your pain isn't real or that you should just accept harmful situations without working to change them. What I'm saying is this: the pain of the situation is one thing. The suffering you add through resistance is another. You can acknowledge pain without fighting reality. You can work to change circumstances while accepting that right now, in this moment, this is where you are. That acceptance doesn't make you weak. It makes you clear. It gives you solid ground to stand on instead of the quicksand of, this shouldn't be happening. From clarity, you can act wisely. From resistance, you can only thrash and exhaust yourself. So I invite you to try something right now, in this moment. Take a breath and notice where you're resisting. What reality are you fighting? What truth are you refusing to accept? Where in your body can you feel that resistance living? And then, just for this one breath, see if you can soften. Not give up, not collapse, but soften. Relax the grip just a little. Let your hands open instead of staying clenched. Say to yourself, even if you don't fully believe it yet, this is what is. I don't have to like it, but I can stop fighting it long enough to see clearly. And notice what happens when you do. Often, there's a moment of relief, not because anything external has changed, but because you've stopped adding your struggle on top of what's already difficult. That relief is a taste of peace. Not the peace of perfect circumstances, but the peace of alignment with truth. The peace that comes when you stop demanding that the river run uphill and instead learn to move with its current, even when the current takes you somewhere unexpected. This is flow. This is wisdom. This is the path that doesn't exhaust you, even when it's challenging. Because you're no longer fighting yourself and reality at the same time. You're just responding to what is, moment by moment, with as much grace as you can muster. And that, it turns out, is enough. More than enough. And this brings us to one of the most misunderstood teachings in Buddhism, detachment. Because most people think it means not caring, but that's not it at all. Let me share what it really means. Detachment has gotten a bad reputation, especially in a culture that measures love by how tightly you hold on. We're taught that if you really love something, you fight for it. You never let it go. You hold on no matter what. We're told that letting go means you didn't care enough, didn't try hard enough, didn't love deeply enough. And so when Buddhist teachings talk about detachment, people hear coldness. They hear indifference. They hear a kind of emotional distance that feels like the opposite of love. They imagine monks sitting stone-faced on mountaintops, unmoved by joy or sorrow, disconnected from the messiness of human life. But that's a profound misunderstanding. Detachment, in the Buddhist sense, is not about caring less. It's about loving more skillfully. It's about learning to care for things without strangling them, to hold them without crushing them, to appreciate them without needing to own them. It's about recognizing that the tightest grip doesn't preserve what you love. It damages it, and damages you in the process. This is one of the hardest truths you'll ever have to learn. Not every goodbye is a loss. Sometimes what leaves is protection you can't see yet. Sometimes the person who walks away is saving you from a future version of pain that would have been unbearable. Sometimes the opportunity that closes was never aligned with where you're actually meant to go. Sometimes the version of yourself that you're grieving needed to die so a truer version could emerge. But you can't see any of this while you're clinging. The Buddha used the word upadana to describe this clinging, this desperate grasping that tries to freeze life in place. And he was very clear. Upadana is the fuel that keeps suffering burning. Not the initial pain of loss or change. That pain is natural, human, inevitable. But the ongoing suffering that comes from refusing to accept that things have changed, from insisting that what's gone should have stayed, from holding so tight to what no longer is that you can't open your hands to receive what's coming, that's upadana. That's the clinging that keeps you trapped in suffering, long after the initial pain could have passed. Let me tell you a story that illustrates this perfectly. Two monks were walking together on a pilgrimage, their feet dusty from days of travel. They had both taken strict vows, including a vow never to touch a woman. These vows weren't arbitrary rules. They were commitments the monks had made to simplify their lives, to reduce attachments, to focus on their practice. As they walked, they came to a river swollen with recent rain. The water was rushing fast, dangerous, difficult to cross. Standing at the river's edge was a woman in fine clothes, clearly distressed. She needed to cross but couldn't manage it alone. The first monk didn't hesitate. He walked over to her, picked her up gently, and carried her across the river, the cold water rushing around his legs. On the other side, he carefully set her down on dry ground. She thanked him with genuine gratitude, and he and his companion continued on their way. The second monk said nothing, but his face was tight with disapproval, his jaw clenched, his steps heavy. They walked in silence for an hour, 2 hours, 3 hours through the afternoon heat. The second monk's tension grew more obvious with each step, his breathing shallow, his shoulders rigid. Finally, unable to contain himself any longer, he burst out, "How could you do that? You know we have taken vows. You touched a woman. You carried her. You violated everything we stand for." The first monk looked at him calmly, his eyes gentle, and said, "Brother, I put her down at the river 3 hours ago. Why are you still carrying her?" This story cuts right to the heart of clinging. The first monk engaged with reality as it presented itself. A person needed help. He helped, and then he moved on. No attachment to the action, no story about what it meant, no clinging to either pride or shame. He saw what was needed in the moment, responded appropriately, and then released it completely. The second monk, despite never touching the woman, was completely entangled with her. He carried her in his mind, in his judgment, in his rigid ideas about how things should be. He was trapped by his clinging to rules, to rightness, to his mental story about transgression and purity. Which monk do you think was more free? Which one was actually living his vows of non-attachment? How many things are you still carrying that happened hours, days, months, or even years ago? How many conversations are you replaying in your mind, editing them, rewriting them, defending yourself in arguments that are long over? How many relationships are you still litigating internally even though they've long since ended? How many versions of yourself are you refusing to put down, Still trying to be who you were 5 years ago, 10 years ago, when life is asking you to become someone new. The weight you feel isn't from what happened. It's from your refusal to set it down. This is what clinging does. It keeps you bound to what's already gone, what's already changed, what can never be again. And here's the painful irony. When you hold on to what wants to leave, you're not preserving it. You're imprisoning yourself. Think about a relationship that's ended but that you can't let go of. Maybe you replay the conversations, analyze what went wrong, hold imaginary arguments where you finally say the perfect thing. Maybe you keep checking their social media, maintaining a secret hope that things will somehow return to how they were. Maybe you compare every new person you meet to them, finding everyone lacking because you've turned them into an idealized memory instead of the flawed human they actually were. You think you're holding on to them, but you're not. They're already gone. What you're actually holding on to is your own suffering. You're choosing, moment by moment, to stay tethered to something that no longer exists except as a story in your mind. And that tether, that clinging, prevents you from being fully present with your actual life, which is happening right now, without them, waiting for you to notice it. There's a natural cycle to all things: arrival, purpose, completion, departure. Everything that enters your life comes for a reason, serves a purpose, completes its role, and then leaves to make space for what's next. People arrive to teach you something about yourself, about love, about boundaries, about growth. When the teaching is complete, the relationship often completes too. Jobs arrive to develop certain skills, to put you in certain places, to connect you with certain people. When that's done, the job often ends, whether by your choice or circumstances beyond your control. Versions of yourself arrive to help you navigate particular chapters. When the chapter closes, that version of you needs to be released, so the next version can emerge. This is not tragedy. This is the natural rhythm of a life being lived. But we panic at departure. We interpret every ending as rejection, every completion as failure, every goodbye as proof that we weren't enough to make things stay. And so we cling. We try to extend what's already complete. We try to revive what has naturally died. We try to force another season out of something whose season has passed. The Buddha taught that suffering has a cause, and the cause is tanha and upadana, craving and clinging. The desperate need for things to be other than they are, the refusal to accept completion, the grasping that tries to make permanent what is, by nature, temporary. And he also taught the end of suffering, letting go. Not because you don't care, but precisely because you do. Real love, mature, wise, compassionate love knows when to hold and when to release. There are signs that life is asking you to let go if you're willing to notice them. Exhaustion that doesn't lift no matter how much you rest. That's your system telling you that maintaining this connection, this job, this version of yourself is draining more energy than it's returning. Repetition of the same painful patterns without change or growth. That's life showing you that this situation has taught you all it can, and continuing it is just rehearsing old lessons instead of learning new ones. A drained feeling whenever you engage with a person, project, or situation. That heaviness in your chest, that sudden fatigue, that sense of going through motions without meaning. That's your intuition saying this is no longer aligned with your path, even if it once was. The constant need to convince yourself or others that you should stay, that it's worth it, that it will get better. When something is truly right, it doesn't require that much justification. It might be difficult, yes, but there's a quality of rightness underneath the difficulty. When you're clinging to what needs to be released, there's only effort with no foundation of truth beneath it. These aren't failures. They're invitations to practice detachment, to release what has completed its purpose, so something else can arrive. But we're so afraid of emptiness. We're terrified that if we let go, there will be nothing, that we'll be alone, abandoned, lost in a void with nothing to hold on to. So we stay in relationships that have died. We stay in jobs that drain us. We stay tethered to identities that no longer fit. We stay holding on to pain because at least it's familiar. At least it's something. But here's what you need to understand. The emptiness you fear isn't what comes from letting go. The real emptiness, the hollow, aching emptiness, is what you're experiencing right now while you're clinging. The emptiness of maintaining something that's already gone, of pretending something is alive when it's already complete, of pouring your energy into a vessel with no bottom. That's emptiness, disguised as fullness. True emptiness, the spaciousness that comes from releasing what's finished, isn't void. It's potential. It's the fertile ground where new things can grow. You cannot plant a garden in soil that's already full of dead roots. You have to clear the space first. And that's what detachment does. It clears the space. The Buddha said something that might bring you comfort. You only lose what you cling to. Read that again slowly. You only lose what you cling to. What you hold lightly, what you appreciate without grasping, what you love without needing to possess, that remains accessible to you in memory, in lessons learned, in the person you became through the experience. But what you cling to, what you refuse to release, what you try to freeze in place, that's what you truly lose, because clinging distorts it, turns it from a gift into a burden, from a memory into a haunting. Detachment allows things to remain beautiful even as they change or leave. Without detachment, everything beautiful eventually becomes a source of suffering because you're too busy grieving its impermanence to appreciate its presence. Now, here's the teaching that balances everything, the middle way. The Buddha's path is always the middle way, not too tight, not too loose, not clinging, not abandoning, not indifference, not obsession. Detachment doesn't mean you stop caring about people. It means you care about them enough to not turn them into objects for your own need. It doesn't mean you stop trying in your work. It means you give your best effort without tying your worth to the outcome. It doesn't mean you become emotionless. It means you feel your emotions fully without letting them dictate your every action or becoming your entire identity. Care deeply, but hold lightly. Love fully, but don't strangle. Engage completely, but know when to step back. This is upekkha, equanimity, not the cold indifference that people fear, but an even-minded care that can remain steady, whether things go your way or not. Upekkha is the grandmother of all the Buddhist virtues of the heart. It's what allows metta, loving kindness, to remain stable instead of collapsing into attachment. It's what allows karuna, compassion, to help without burning out from over-identification with others' suffering. It's what allows you to wish someone well even as they walk away from your life. And yes, you can do that. You can practice metta even toward those who have left, even toward parts of yourself you're releasing. You can say, silently in your heart, may you be happy, may you be peaceful, may you be free from suffering, may you find your way. Even to someone who hurt you, even to a relationship that ended painfully, even to a version of yourself that you're grieving. This isn't condoning harm or pretending pain didn't happen. This is releasing yourself from the prison of resentment, from the weight of carrying them in your mind long after they've left your life. When you can wish someone well and mean it, even as you let them go, you've found the balance. You've discovered how to love without clinging. And here's what's remarkable. When you practice this kind of detachment, what's truly meant to stay in your life becomes obvious. The people, the work, the passions that remain without you having to force them, without you having to exhaust yourself holding on, those are aligned with your path. They flow with you because they're supposed to be there, not because you've chained them to you with need and fear. Everything else, everything that requires constant effort just to maintain, that drains you, that you have to convince yourself is worth it. That's the universe showing you what's ready to be released. I know this is difficult to hear. If you're in the process of letting go of something right now, This might feel impossible. You might be thinking, but I'm not ready. But it's too soon. But I don't know who I am without this. And that's okay. Detachment isn't something you force. That would just be another form of violence against yourself, another way of creating suffering through resistance. Detachment is something that arises naturally when you see clearly, when you truly understand impermanence, when you recognize that clinging creates suffering, when you trust that letting go makes space for what's next. You don't have to be perfect at this. You don't have to let go of everything all at once. You just have to be willing to notice when you're clinging, to feel the tightness in your chest when you think about losing something, to recognize the exhaustion of trying to hold on to what's already slipping away. And then, in those moments, to take one breath and whisper to yourself, I can hold this a little more loosely. I can care without crushing. I can love without owning. That's the practice. Not perfection, just practice. One breath at a time, one release at a time, learning that your hands were never meant to be fists. Detachment is not about becoming hard or cold or distant. It's about becoming free enough to love more fully, to be present more completely, to appreciate more deeply, not despite impermanence, but because of it. When you know that everything is temporary, every moment becomes precious. When you know that nothing truly belongs to you, you can receive everything as a gift. When you know that all things must change, you can finally stop fighting and start flowing. And in that flow, there's a lightness you forgot was possible. A way of moving through life that doesn't leave you exhausted from holding on. A way of loving that doesn't turn into suffering the moment something changes. This is what detachment offers. Not less love, but more skillful love. Not less care, but wiser care. Not less feeling, but more freedom within your feelings. I know this is hard to hear. So let's pause for a moment. Let's breathe together. We've covered a lot of ground together, haven't we? Heavy truths about impermanence, about resistance, about the art of letting go. So let's pause here for a moment. How are you feeling right now? Maybe your chest feels a little tight from recognizing yourself in these teachings. Maybe you're tired, not from the listening, but from carrying what we've been talking about for so long. That's okay. You can pause this anytime you need to. You can come back whenever you're ready. This isn't going anywhere. And you don't need to remember everything I've said. You don't need to take notes or try to hold on to every word. Your heart knows what it needs to keep. Trust that what's meant to stay with you will stay. Take a breath with me now. Feel your chest rise and fall. Notice that you're here, alive, breathing. And know that right now, across the world, thousands of us are breathing together. Different time zones, different struggles, but the same search for peace. You're not alone in this. You're exactly where you need to be. May you be at peace. May you be free from suffering. When you're ready, I have something important to share about why you don't need all the answers right now, and why that's actually freedom. There's a kind of suffering that doesn't come from what happens to you. It comes from your desperate need to understand why it happened. Why did this relationship end? Why did I lose this opportunity? Why did this illness come? Why me? Why now? Why this way? The mind becomes obsessed with these questions, spinning endlessly, convinced that if you could just understand the reason, the pain would make sense and you could finally rest. But that's not how it works. The Buddha encountered this pattern of thinking constantly. People would come to him with metaphysical questions. Where did the universe come from? What happens after death? Why do bad things happen to good people? And often, he would refuse to answer. Not because he didn't know, but because he understood something crucial. The mind's demand for answers is often a distraction from the actual work of healing. There's a famous teaching called the poison arrow parable that illustrates this perfectly. A man is shot with a poisoned arrow. The poison is spreading through his body, moving toward his heart. Death is approaching quickly. His friends rush him to a doctor, but the man refuses treatment. "Wait," he says, pushing away the doctor's hands. "Before you remove this arrow, I need to know who shot it. Was it a warrior or a farmer? What family did he come from? Was he tall or short? Dark-skinned or light?" The doctor tries to intervene, but the man continues. "And what kind of bow was used? What wood is the arrow made from? What feathers guide its flight? What type of poison was used? And where did it come from?" The Buddha, telling this story, looked at his students and said simply, "This man would die before getting answers to all these questions." The wise response is clear. First, remove the arrow. This is what your mind does with suffering. Instead of tending to the actual wound, the grief, the fear, the pain of what is, you demand a complete understanding of why before you're willing to begin healing. You refuse to move forward until someone explains the cosmic logic behind your suffering, until you can trace the arrow back to its source and understand every detail of how it came to pierce you. And while you're asking these questions, the poison spreads. The suffering deepens, not because of what happened, but because you're paralyzed by the need to understand it. Here's the truth your mind doesn't want to hear. Understanding why something happened doesn't actually reduce the pain of it happening. Knowing exactly why your relationship ended doesn't unbreak your heart. Understanding all the factors that led to your loss doesn't restore what you've lost. What your mind really wants when it asks why is control. It wants to believe that if you can just figure out the formula, if you can understand exactly what went wrong, you can prevent it from ever happening again. You can make yourself safe through understanding. But life doesn't work that way. The Buddha taught about avidya, often translated as ignorance, but more accurately understood as a fundamental misunderstanding of how reality works. Avidya is the belief that you can control outcomes through perfect knowledge, that if you just understand enough, plan enough, prepare enough, you can protect yourself from pain. But that's different from the wisdom of not knowing. Not knowing isn't ignorance. It's humility. It's the recognition that some things cannot be understood in the moment they're happening. Some lessons reveal themselves only in retrospect. Some patterns become clear only after years of living. Some wisdom arrives not through analysis, but through acceptance and time. The difference between being lost and not knowing is crucial. Being lost is disorientation, panic, the feeling that you should know where you are, but don't. Not knowing is presence in uncertainty. It's the ability to say, I don't understand this yet, and that's okay. I'm here, I'm breathing, I'm taking the next step, even without knowing where the whole path leads. There's a question that changes everything, and it's so simple you might miss its power. Instead of asking, why is this happening to me? Which positions you as victim of random cruelty, try asking, what is this teaching me? That one shift transforms your relationship to difficulty. Why me is a dead end. It's a question that has no satisfying answer and creates resentment, even in the asking. What is this teaching me? Opens a door. It assumes that even painful experiences contain information, lessons, invitations to grow in ways you couldn't have grown otherwise. You move from victim to student in one question. And students can learn from anything. Victims can only suffer. Let me share a story that shaped how I understand this teaching. There was a Zen master named Hakuin who lived in a small village in Japan. He was deeply respected, known for his wisdom and his steady, unshakable presence. Near his temple lived a young woman from a wealthy family. She became pregnant, and when her parents demanded to know who the father was, terrified of their anger, she named Hakuin. The parents were outraged. They stormed to the temple and confronted the master with fury and accusations. Hakuin's only response was, "Is that so?" When the baby was born, the parents brought the infant to Hakuin. "This child is your responsibility now," they said, thrusting the baby into his arms. Hakuin took the child without protest, without defense, without explanation. His only response, Is that so? His reputation was destroyed overnight. People who had revered him now whispered about him in the streets. Students left. Donations stopped. He was shamed publicly. His life's work seemingly undone by scandal. But Hakuin simply cared for the baby. He begged for milk from neighbors, changed diapers, walked the temple grounds with the infant in his arms, singing softly. He asked no one to believe his innocence. He made no attempt to clear his name. He didn't demand explanations or justice. He simply lived in the truth of what was, which was, there was a baby who needed care, and he could provide it. A year passed. Finally, the young woman could no longer bear the guilt. She confessed to her parents that the real father was a young man from the village, and she had lied out of fear. The parents, mortified, rushed back to Hakuin. They apologized profusely, explained the mistake, praised his character, and asked for the baby back. Hakuin handed over the child gently. His only response, "Is that so?" This story isn't about passivity or doormat behavior. It's about something much more profound, the freedom that comes when you stop needing to understand, justify, or control the narrative of your life. Hakuin didn't know why this was happening. He didn't know how long it would last. He didn't know if his reputation would ever recover. But he also didn't waste his energy demanding answers to those questions. He simply responded to what was real. A baby needed care. So he cared for the baby. When the situation changed, he adapted without clinging to either the accusation or the vindication. Is that so? Isn't indifference. It's the sound of a mind that has learned to tolerate uncertainty without collapsing into panic or bitterness. It's the wisdom of not knowing in action. Most of us would have spent that entire year obsessing over the injustice, demanding recognition of our innocence, bitter about the unfairness, paralyzed by the need for everyone to understand the truth. But that would have been suffering on top of suffering. The situation was difficult enough without adding the torture of, why is this happening? This shouldn't be happening. People should know the truth. This isn't fair. Learning to tolerate uncertainty, to live fully, even when you don't understand why things are unfolding as they are, builds an inner strength that nothing else can develop. It's a kind of resilience that doesn't depend on circumstances making sense. The Buddha taught something important about faith. Saddha, in the original language. It's not blind belief. It's not wishful thinking. It's trust, based on observation and experience. Trust that things arise from conditions. Trust that everything is constantly changing. Trust that there's a natural unfolding happening even when you can't see the pattern yet. This kind of faith doesn't require knowing the whole plan. It just requires being willing to take the next step, tend to what's in front of you, and trust that clarity will come when it comes. Here's what I've learned through years of not knowing. The revelation almost always comes after the lesson, not during it. When you're in the middle of difficulty, confusion is normal. You can't see the whole picture because you're still inside it. But years later, you look back and suddenly it's obvious. Oh, that relationship had to end so you could learn to stand on your own. That job loss forced you into a career that actually aligned with who you are. That period of loneliness taught you how to be comfortable with yourself. That illness slowed you down enough to reevaluate what actually matters. At the time, it just felt like suffering, like something going wrong, like punishment or bad luck or cosmic injustice. But from the vantage point of time and distance, you can see it was preparation. It was education. It was life clearing space for something you didn't even know you needed yet. So when you're in the middle of not knowing right now, can you hold this possibility? That even though you don't understand it yet, even though it hurts and feels wrong, and you desperately want answers, this might be teaching you something essential. Can you be the student instead of the victim? Can you ask, "What is this for?" instead of demanding, "Why is this happening? Why?" The Buddha gave very specific guidance about what to trust when you don't know what to believe. He said, "Do not believe in anything simply because you have heard it, or because it is spoken and rumored by many, or because it is found written in your religious books. But after observation and analysis, when you find that anything agrees with reason and is conducive to the good and benefit of one and all, then accept it and live up to it." In other words, trust your direct experience. When you let go of the need to understand everything, does your chest relax? Does your breathing deepen? Do you feel lighter? Then that's evidence that not knowing might be wisdom, not weakness. When you shift from "why me" to "what can I learn?" does your perspective expand? Does agency return? Does the situation feel less like a trap? Then that shift is worth making, regardless of whether you ever get the cosmic explanation you're looking for. You don't need permission from the universe to stop demanding answers. You don't need a complete explanation before you begin healing. You can remove the arrow first and ask questions later. You can care for the baby in your arms without knowing why he was placed there. You can take the next step without seeing the whole staircase. This is the practice, noticing when your mind is spinning in "why" and gently bringing yourself back to "what now?" Why did this happen becomes less important than what am I going to do with it? Why me becomes less urgent than who am I becoming through this? And slowly, the obsession with understanding loosens its grip. You stop waiting for perfect clarity before you're willing to live. You start moving forward even in fog, trusting that each step will reveal the next, even if the destination remains unclear. That's not blindness. That's not naivety. That's the mature faith of someone who has lived long enough to know that not everything reveals its purpose immediately. Some seeds take 5 years underground before they break the surface. Some lessons take decades to understand. Some why questions never get answered. And somehow, you're okay anyway. And here's the permission you might have been waiting your whole life to hear. There's a voice in your head that measures everything. It compares where you are to where you think you should be by now. It looks at other people's timelines and finds yours lacking. It whispers constantly, "You should be further along. You should have figured this out already. You should be better, wiser, more healed, more successful, more something than you are." This voice creates a very specific kind of suffering. Not the suffering of actual difficulty, but the suffering of feeling perpetually behind, perpetually inadequate, perpetually failing some invisible standard that shifts every time you think you're close to meeting it. Let me tell you something that might bring relief. You're not broken. You're not damaged goods that need fixing before you're allowed to live fully. You're not a problem waiting to be solved. You're in process. And process, by definition, is unfinished. The Zen tradition has a concept called Shoshin, beginner's mind. It's the idea that no matter how much you know, no matter how far you've come, you approach each moment as if for the first time. Fresh, open, curious, without the burden of needing to be the expert or having it all figured out. Beginner's mind doesn't mean forgetting what you've learned. It means not letting what you've learned close you off to what's still emerging. It means every breath is a chance to begin again. Every morning is an opportunity to meet yourself anew, without the weight of yesterday's failures or the pressure of tomorrow's expectations. Right now, in this moment, you are exactly as you're meant to be, not finished, not perfect, but present and alive and learning. There's a story that illustrates the futility of rushing your own development. A young student came to a Zen master, eager and ambitious, ready to dedicate his life to the practice. "Master," he said, bowing deeply, "if I study with complete devotion, how long will it take me to reach enlightenment?" The master looked at him thoughtfully and said, 10 years. The student's face fell. 10 years felt like forever. "But master," he said, "what if I practice twice as hard? What if I meditate longer, study more intensely, dedicate every waking moment to the path? How long then?" The master smiled and said, 20 years. The student was confused, frustrated. "I don't understand. If I work harder, shouldn't it take less time?" The master replied gently, When you have one eye on the goal, you have only one eye on the path. The more desperately you rush toward enlightenment, the more you miss the practice that actually leads there. Transformation cannot be forced. It unfolds according to its own rhythm, through patient attention to each moment, not through aggressive pursuit of the destination. This is what we miss when we're obsessed with being further along. We're so focused on where we think we should be that we can't fully inhabit where we actually are. And where you actually are is the only place growth can happen. The Buddha taught what's called the gradual path, the understanding that wisdom develops in stages, that certain insights are only possible after others have been integrated, that rushing past necessary foundations creates an unstable structure. You can't skip steps. You can't leapfrog from beginner to master by sheer force of will. You have to live through each stage, learning what it has to teach before you're ready for what comes next. Being in process isn't the same as being behind. Behind implies there's a race you're losing, but you're not racing anyone. You're walking your own path at the only pace that's sustainable for you, given your particular history, your particular wounds, your particular strengths and struggles. Some people seem to grow faster, heal quicker, understand sooner, but you don't know what conditions shape their path. You don't know what they're still carrying, that you've already released. You don't know what lessons they'll face later, that you've already learned. Comparison is not only painful, it's meaningless. You're not them. Your journey is yours alone. There's profound courage in the words, "I don't know yet." In a world that demands certainty, expertise, instant mastery, admitting you're still learning feels vulnerable. But "I don't know yet" is not the same as "I'll never know." It's the acknowledgement that you're in the middle of becoming, that understanding is still unfolding, that you're humble enough to admit you haven't arrived. And that humility, that willingness to be a perpetual student of your own life, is what keeps you growing. The moment you decide you've figured everything out is the moment you stop learning. Your timeline is not wrong. It's not too slow, or too late, or off track. It's yours, shaped by every choice you've made, every circumstance you've encountered, every wound that needed tending before you could move forward. Some people heal childhood pain in their 20s. Others don't even begin to address it until their 50s. Neither is better or worse. They're just different paths with different timing. Some people find their calling early and move toward it steadily. Others wander for decades, collecting experiences that seem unrelated until suddenly they all click into place and make perfect sense. Your way is not the wrong way just because it doesn't match someone else's trajectory. There's a Japanese art form called kintsugi that holds a powerful teaching about process and imperfection. When a ceramic bowl or vase breaks, instead of throwing it away or hiding the damage, kintsugi artisans repair it with lacquer mixed with gold, silver, or platinum. The cracks aren't disguised. They're highlighted, honored, turned into the most beautiful part of the piece. The philosophy behind this practice is profound. The breaking and the repair are part of the object's history, and that history doesn't diminish its value. If anything, the piece becomes more valuable, more beautiful, more unique because of what it's been through. The gold seams say, yes, this broke. Yes, it was damaged. And look, it's still here, still whole, more radiant than before because of what it survived. You are kintsugi. The places where you've broken, the grief, the failures, the moments you thought would destroy you, those aren't flaws to hide. They're the gold seams that make you uniquely, powerfully, beautifully you. Being in process means some of those cracks are still being filled. The gold is still being applied. The repair is ongoing. And that's not failure. That's just reality for anyone who's lived long enough to break and brave enough to keep repairing themselves instead of staying shattered. Now, here's where self-compassion becomes essential, and it's important to distinguish self-compassion from self-indulgence. Self-compassion is treating yourself with the same kindness you'd offer a good friend who's struggling. It's acknowledging that growth is hard, that setbacks are normal, that you're doing your best, even when your best feels inadequate. Self-indulgence is using your difficulty as an excuse to avoid necessary action, to stay stuck in patterns that harm you, to refuse responsibility for your part in your own suffering. The Buddha taught karuna, compassion, not as permissive softness, but as wise tenderness. Compassion says, this is hard, and I'm going to be gentle with myself while still taking the next necessary step. It doesn't say, this is hard, so I'm giving up. There's a difference between growing and performing. Growing is internal, organic, often invisible to others. It happens in the quiet moments when you choose differently than you used to, when you notice a pattern you couldn't see before, when you respond with patience where you once reacted with anger. Performing is external, curated, designed to convince others and yourself that you're more evolved than you feel. Growing is messy, non-linear, full of backward steps and sideways detours. Performing is polished, presentable, exhausting to maintain because it's not real. You don't have to perform progress. You just have to keep growing, even when no one's watching, even when it's slow, even when you're not sure it's working. The fourth noble truth in Buddhism is often overlooked in favor of the dramatic first three, that suffering exists, that it has a cause, that it can end. But the fourth is perhaps the most comforting. There is a path. Not a destination you failed to reach, but a path you're already walking. The Eightfold Path isn't a checklist to complete before you're allowed to be at peace. It's a way of living, a set of practices you engage with continuously, always deepening, never perfecting. Right understanding develops over time. Right intention strengthens gradually. Right speech gets easier, but never effortless. Even the Buddha, after his enlightenment, after his profound awakening, taught for 45 more years. He didn't reach enlightenment and then stop. He continued practicing, teaching, learning, refining his understanding through decades of lived experience. If the Buddha himself remained a student of life after his great awakening, what makes you think you should have it all figured out by now? You're not falling behind. You're deepening. Every time you think you've learned a lesson, and then find yourself facing it again at a deeper level, you're not regressing. You're spiraling upward, encountering the same themes but with more wisdom, more tools, more capacity each time. The first time you face abandonment, you might just survive it. The second time, you might understand it's not personal. The third time, you might feel compassion for the person leaving. The fourth time, you might recognize your own role in the pattern. That's not failing to learn. That's learning at increasingly subtle levels. This is the practice, catching yourself when the voice says you should be further along, and gently countering it with, I am exactly where decades of causes and conditions have brought me, and from here, I can only move forward. Catching yourself when you feel behind, and reminding yourself, behind what? Behind whose timeline? My path is mine alone. Catching yourself when you feel broken and whispering, I'm not broken. I'm in process. And process is allowed to be messy. You have permission to be unfinished. You have permission to still be learning, still be healing, still be figuring out who you are and what you need and how to live well. You have permission to change your mind about things you were certain about, to outgrow versions of yourself you worked hard to become, to not have all the answers yet. You have permission to be a work in progress for the rest of your life, because that's what being alive means. Constant becoming, constant unfolding, constant discovery of new depths, and new challenges, and new capacities. The goal isn't to arrive at some final, perfected state where you never struggle again. The goal is to walk the path with awareness, with compassion for yourself and others, with openness to whatever comes. And you're doing that right now, in this moment, by being here, by listening, by being willing to look at yourself honestly and still choose to keep going. That's enough. More than enough. Now I want to talk about the quietest kind of strength, the kind the world doesn't applaud, but the kind that changes everything. There's a kind of confidence that doesn't need to be seen. It doesn't announce itself at parties or defend itself in arguments. It doesn't post updates about its progress or seek validation for its choices. It simply is, quiet, steady, unshakable, in a way that loud certainty never achieves. This is the confidence the Buddhist teachings point toward. Saddha, often translated as faith, but more accurately understood as a deep confidence that comes not from belief, but from direct experience. Real confidence doesn't broadcast. Think about the people you've met who talk constantly about how confident they are, how certain they are, how much they've figured out. There's usually something brittle underneath all that noise, isn't there? An insecurity so loud, it has to keep drowning itself out with proclamations of certainty. Loudness is often a mask. It's the sound of someone trying to convince themselves as much as anyone else. True confidence, on the other hand, has nothing to prove. It rests quietly at your center, like a flame that doesn't flicker, even when the wind blows. It doesn't need applause to know it's real. It doesn't need external validation to trust itself. This kind of trust is like your breath, invisible, constant, essential. You don't think about breathing most of the time. You don't question whether the next breath will come. You don't need to convince anyone that you know how to breathe. It just happens, reliably, in the background of everything else you do. That's what genuine confidence feels like. Not a performance, not a defense, just a quiet knowing that runs underneath everything, holding you steady even when circumstances shake. Here's something important to understand. Confidence is not the same as certainty. Certainty is rigid. It claims to know exactly how things will turn out, refuses to consider other possibilities, becomes defensive when challenged. Confidence is flexible. It says, I don't know exactly what will happen, but I trust my ability to handle whatever comes. Certainty needs things to go a specific way to feel safe. Confidence can adapt when plans change because it's not invested in one particular outcome. Certainty is about knowing what will happen. Confidence is about knowing you have the capacity to respond to what happens. And that capacity isn't built through success alone. In fact, genuine confidence is built more through breaking than through winning. Every time you faced something difficult and survived it, not conquered it with ease, but survived it, stumbled through it, found a way when you thought there was no way, you've built confidence. Every time you've fallen apart and put yourself back together, you've proven to yourself that breaking isn't the end. Every time you've been uncertain and moved forward anyway, you've trained yourself in the art of trusting your resilience, even when outcomes are unclear. This is the confidence that lasts, because it's not based on everything going well. It's based on knowing you can handle things even when they don't. There's a Zen teaching that says, the mountain doesn't need to prove it's a mountain. It doesn't shout its existence or defend its height. It doesn't compare itself to other mountains or worry that it's not impressive enough. It simply stands, solid and present, exactly as it is, and that unwavering presence is its power. You don't need to justify your existence or prove your worth or convince anyone of your value. Those who can see will see. Those who can't won't, and that's not your concern. Your only job is to stand in your truth with the quiet solidity of the mountain, unmoved by judgment, unshaken by doubt, simply present with what you know to be true about yourself. The Buddha taught about right effort, sama vayama, as one of the steps on the Eightfold Path. Most people misunderstand what this means. They think it's about trying harder, pushing more, never giving up, no matter how exhausted you are. But that's not right effort at all. Right effort is balanced effort. It's trying without straining. It's engaging fully without burning out. It's the difference between a musician practicing scales with focused attention and someone pounding the keys in frustrated desperation, hoping volume will compensate for lack of skill. Right effort knows when to push and when to rest, when to engage and when to step back, when to try again, and when to accept that this particular door isn't meant to open. This kind of balanced effort requires confidence, not in getting what you want, but in your ability to discern wise action from desperate forcing. And that discernment comes from practice, from experience, from paying attention to what actually works versus what just exhausts you. Patience is confidence's foundation. Think about it. You can only be patient when you trust that things will unfold as they need to, that you don't have to force or rush, that the timing of your life has its own intelligence. Impatience is fear disguised as urgency. It's the anxious voice that says, if it doesn't happen now, it never will. Patience is trust that the seeds you've planted are growing even when you can't see them yet, that conditions are ripening in their own time, that your effort matters even when results aren't immediate. The Buddha taught, better than 1,000 hollow words is one word that brings peace. This teaching applies to how you live, not just how you speak. Better than 1,000 frantic actions born from anxiety is one grounded choice born from clarity. Better than 1,000 loud proclamations of who you are is the quiet consistency of actually being that person when no one's watching. Better than 1,000 attempts to prove yourself is the simple embodiment of your values, day after day, without fanfare or applause. Real confidence lives in that one word, that one grounded choice, that quiet consistency. There's a crucial difference between ego and presence. that often gets confused. Ego is loud because it's fragile. It needs constant reinforcement, constant validation, constant proof that it exists and matters. Ego compares itself to others endlessly, because without that comparison, it doesn't know how to measure its worth. Ego takes criticism as attack and praise as proof, swinging between inflated grandiosity and crushing self-doubt, depending on external feedback. Presence, on the other hand, is quiet because it's secure. It doesn't need to defend itself because it's not threatened by other perspectives. It doesn't need to compare because it's not trying to be better than anyone. It's simply being itself as fully as possible. Presence can receive criticism without collapsing and praise without inflating, because its sense of self isn't dependent on what others think. Ego says, "Look at me, see how confident I am." Presence doesn't need to say anything at all. When you've walked through enough difficulty, survived enough uncertainty, learned enough about your own capacity to adapt and endure, something shifts. You stop needing to announce your strength because you've felt it tested and proven in the quiet darkness when no one was watching. You stop performing confidence because you've earned the real thing through all the times you had to dig deep and find reserves you didn't know you had. Your resilience is the proof. Not the resilience you claim in conversation, but the resilience written into your bones from every moment you chose to keep going when giving up would have been easier. That's sada, the confidence that comes from direct experience of your own path. The Buddha didn't ask anyone to believe him blindly. He said, essentially, try these practices yourself. See what happens. Trust your own experience above any authority, including mine. This is faith earned through walking the path yourself, not faith borrowed from someone else's certainty. When you sit with your breath day after day and notice it actually does calm your racing thoughts, you develop sada in the practice of mindful breathing. When you practice letting go of small things and notice you feel lighter, freer, less burdened, you develop sada in non-attachment. When you choose patience over urgency and watch situations resolve themselves without your forcing, you develop sada in trusting natural timing. This isn't blind faith. This is confidence built on evidence. The evidence of your own lived experience, showing you what works and what doesn't. And that kind of confidence can't be shaken by someone else's opinion, because you didn't get it from someone else's opinion in the first place. You earned it yourself. There's a profound freedom in the difference between knowing and needing to prove. When you know something, really know it in your bones, not just think it in your head. You don't need anyone else to validate it. You can let others disagree without feeling threatened. You can let others doubt without feeling the need to convince them. because their doubt doesn't touch what you know to be true from your own experience. This doesn't mean you're closed to new information or too proud to admit when you're wrong. It means you've learned to distinguish between your essential knowing, the deep truths you've learned through lived experience, and the opinions and ideas you hold more lightly, open to revision as you learn more. Confidence isn't about being right all the time. It's about trusting yourself to figure it out, to adapt when you're wrong, to learn from mistakes without letting them define you. The Buddhist teaching of samadhi, concentration, or mental stability speaks to this quiet confidence. When your mind is trained, when you've practiced returning to center again and again through meditation, something develops, an unshakable quality that remains steady regardless of external turbulence. Not because nothing affects you, but because you've learned to find your ground even when everything around you is shaking. This is what silent confidence looks like in practice. A mind that doesn't panic when challenged, a heart that doesn't close when hurt, a presence that remains available and responsive even in difficulty. You don't have to be loud to be powerful. You don't have to defend yourself constantly to be secure. You don't have to prove your worth to everyone you meet in order to be valuable. The quietest people in the room are often the ones who've walked through the most fire and emerged with something solid that doesn't need to announce itself. They've learned that real confidence isn't performed, it's lived. And it shows not in what they say about themselves, but in how they move through the world, grounded, present, unafraid of uncertainty, because they've learned to trust their ability to meet it. This is the confidence that comes from the middle way, not the arrogance of thinking you know everything, and not the paralysis of doubting everything. Just the steady, balanced, knowing that you've walked this far, learned this much, and you're capable of continuing the journey, one step at a time, without needing a guarantee of where it leads. So, if you've been waiting for permission to stop proving yourself, here it is. You don't need to be louder, bolder, more certain than you are. You just need to trust what you already know, that you've survived everything life has brought you so far, and that's evidence enough of your capacity to handle what comes next. Everything I've shared builds toward this one truth, and it might be the most important thing you hear today. If there's one truth that unites every human being who has ever lived, it's this: we all lose things. People we love, dreams we cherished, versions of ourselves we thought would last forever. Health, certainty, innocence, time, everything we hold eventually slips through our fingers, not because we're doing something wrong, but because that's the nature of existence in a world governed by impermanence. Loss is not a punishment. It's not evidence that you're cursed or unlucky. or being singled out by a cruel universe. It's simply what happens when you're alive, and the Buddha's teaching on this is both devastating and liberating in its clarity. There's a story that captures this truth more powerfully than any explanation could. A young woman named Kisa Gautami lived in a small village with her husband and young son. Her son was everything to her, her joy, her purpose, her entire world. One day, the child became ill. Within hours, before anyone could understand what was happening, he died in her arms. Kisa Gautami couldn't accept it. She refused to believe her son was gone. She carried his small body from house to house, begging for medicine that could revive him, insisting that someone must know how to bring him back. People turned away, uncomfortable, grieving for her, but unable to help. Finally, someone said, "Take the child to the Buddha. If anyone can help you, it's him." So Kisa Gautami carried her son to where the Buddha was teaching. She laid the small body at his feet and pleaded, "Teacher, they say you can perform miracles. Please, bring my son back to life. Please, I'll do anything." The Buddha looked at her with profound compassion. He didn't tell her the child was gone. He didn't explain impermanence or lecture about attachment. Instead, he said gently, "I can help you. But first, I need you to bring me something. Go to the village and bring me a handful of mustard seeds from a household that has never known death. Not a pet, not a distant relative, but any death at all. Bring me seeds from a home that has never experienced loss." Hope flared in Kisa Gautami's chest. This seemed possible. Mustard seeds were common. Every household had them. She went to the first house and knocked. "Can you give me mustard seeds? But only if no one in your family has ever died." The woman at the door looked sad. "I can give you seeds," she said, "but my husband died last year. I'm sorry." Kisa Gautami thanked her and moved to the next house. "Has anyone in your household died?" "My mother, 3 years ago." "The next house, my sister." "The next, my father and my brother." "The next, my child, like yours." House after house, the same truth revealed itself. Every single home had known death. Every family had lost someone. Every person she met carried their own grief, some fresh, some old, but all present. As the sun began to set, Kisa Gautami sat down at the edge of the village, still holding her son, and finally understood. Death wasn't something that happened to her specifically. Loss wasn't a personal punishment. It was the universal truth of being human. Everyone loses. Everyone grieves. Everyone must eventually say goodbye to everything and everyone they love. She carried her son back to the Buddha, no longer asking for a miracle, but for help understanding how to live with this unbearable truth. The Buddha received her with tenderness. "Did you find the mustard seeds?" he asked, though he already knew the answer. "No," she said quietly. "Every house has known death. Every family has lost someone. I thought my pain was unique, but it's not. It's the pain of being human." The Buddha nodded. This is the first noble truth. Life contains dukkha, suffering, loss, impermanence. Not because you've done something wrong, but because this is the nature of conditioned existence. Everything that arises passes away. Everyone born will die. Nothing stays. The path forward isn't to avoid this truth, but to understand it so deeply that you stop taking it personally, stop seeing it as punishment, and start seeing it as the shared condition we all navigate together. Kisa Gotami became one of the Buddha's most devoted students, and the wisdom born from her grief helped countless others understand that their losses, too, were not failures but simply the inevitable unfolding of impermanence. When something falls apart in your life, your first instinct might be to think you failed. That if you'd been smarter, stronger, more careful, more deserving, you could have prevented the loss. But what if that's not true? What if the ending wasn't your failure, but simply impermanence revealing itself, as it always does, as it always will? All conditioned things, everything that comes into being through causes and conditions, are temporary by nature. Relationships, health, jobs, homes, identities, even your physical body, all of it arose from conditions, and when conditions change, forms change with them. This isn't punishment. It's not cosmic judgment. It's just how reality works. The flower blooms because conditions align: soil, water, sunlight, the right temperature. When conditions change, the flower fades. Not because the flower failed, but because impermanence is the nature of all living things. You are like the flower. Everything in your life is like the flower. Sometimes, what leaves your life was simply completing its role. The relationship that ended taught you what you needed to learn about yourself, about love, about boundaries. When the teaching was complete, the form of the relationship completed too. The job that fell away gave you skills, connections, experiences that prepared you for what's coming next, even if you can't see it yet. The version of yourself you're grieving served its purpose in a particular chapter, and now a different chapter requires a different version of you to emerge. This doesn't make the loss hurt less in the moment, but it can shift the meaning you make from it, from something went wrong to something completed. There's a particular kind of wisdom that only reveals itself in retrospect. Years after a painful ending, you look back and suddenly see it clearly. Oh, that's why that relationship had to end. I couldn't see it then, but it was taking me away from myself. Oh, that's why I didn't get that job I wanted so badly. If I had, I never would have found this path that actually fits who I am. Oh, that's why I lost that person. They were never meant to walk the whole journey with me, just that particular part of it. In the moment, it just felt like loss, like failure, like something being taken from you. But from a distance, with time and perspective, you can sometimes see it was redirection, preparation, even protection from something that would have caused greater harm down the road. This is where the Buddhist teaching of karma becomes relevant, not in the oversimplified sense of cosmic reward and punishment, but in its true meaning. Actions have consequences. Conditions create results. You plant seeds through your choices, your words, your thoughts, your patterns. Some seeds grow into flowers. Some grow into thorns. Some take years to sprout. Some never break the surface at all. When something ends in your life, it's not random. It's the result of countless causes and conditions. Your actions, others' actions, circumstances, beyond anyone's control, timing, readiness, alignment. The loss you're experiencing now is connected to seeds planted long ago, conditions that were set in motion before you even recognized what was growing. This isn't about blame. It's about understanding that nothing happens in isolation. Everything is interconnected, arising from an infinite web of causes, and sometimes the ending is simply what had to happen, given all those conditions meeting in this particular way. What feels like falling is often just change, wearing an unfamiliar face. When the ground beneath you shifts, when the structure you relied on crumbles, it feels like descent, like collapse, like everything is going wrong. But sometimes what you call falling is actually shedding, releasing what no longer serves, letting go of what was always meant to be temporary, clearing space for something more aligned to grow. The caterpillar doesn't know it's becoming a butterfly. From inside the chrysalis, it just feels like dissolution, like ending, like death. But that breaking down is necessary for the transformation that's coming. Your breakdowns might be the same, not failures, but metamorphoses, painful transformations that are remaking you into something you couldn't have become while clinging to what was. Loss strips away pretense. When you lose something significant, you see yourself more clearly than you did before. You see what you're actually made of underneath the armor. You see which relationships are real and which were only there for the easy times. You see what you truly value versus what you just said you valued. This clarity is a gift. even though it arrives wrapped in grief. The Buddha taught, in the end, only three things matter: how much you loved, how gently you lived, and how gracefully you let go of things not meant for you. Read that last part again. Things not meant for you. What if some of what you've lost was never meant to stay? What if the universe, or simply the natural unfolding of conditions, was wiser than your clinging and removed what would have eventually harmed you, or limited you, or kept you from becoming who you need to be? This doesn't erase the pain. You're allowed to grieve what's gone, even if its leaving was ultimately for the best. But it might shift how you hold the grief, not as evidence of your failure, but as the natural cost of loving and living and being fully human in a world where nothing lasts forever. People leave your life to teach you non-attachment. Not because they're cruel, but because the universe is constantly inviting you to practice loving without clinging, appreciating without possessing, connecting without demanding permanence. Every goodbye is practice for the ultimate goodbye, the one where you'll leave everything behind, including this body, this identity, this entire life. The wisdom traditions teach that preparing for death isn't morbid, it's essential. Because when you remember that all of this is temporary, including you, you stop wasting time on what doesn't matter. You stop holding grudges that will mean nothing when you're gone. You stop delaying joy until conditions are perfect. You stop taking for granted the people and moments that are here right now, knowing they won't always be. Loss is your teacher in impermanence, and impermanence is your teacher in presence. And here's something that might bring comfort. The space created by loss is not empty, it's fertile. When something ends, when someone leaves, when a door closes, space opens. You can't see what will grow in that space yet, and that's okay. Seeds need time in darkness before they sprout. Wounds need time to heal before the scar tells its story. Endings need time to compost before they become the soil for new beginnings. Trust that the space is not wasted, even when it feels empty, even when you're tempted to fill it with anything, just to avoid the ache of absence. Sometimes the most important thing you can do is let the space be space, trusting that when you're ready, when conditions are right, something new will arrive that couldn't have fit if you'd been clutching what was already gone. Your grief is valid. Let me say that clearly, because sometimes spiritual teachings can make you feel like you're supposed to transcend pain, to understand loss so completely that it doesn't hurt anymore. That's not the teaching. The teaching is, pain is inevitable when you love, when you live, when you allow yourself to be connected to anything in this impermanent world. The Buddha didn't teach you to stop feeling pain. He taught you to stop adding suffering on top of pain by resisting it, by believing it shouldn't be happening, by making it mean something about your worth or your failure. Feel the grief. Honor what you've lost. Let yourself be human in your hurt. And know that your pain is held by something larger, the collective grief of every human being who has ever loved and lost, which is every human being who has ever lived. You're not alone in this. You're part of the oldest, most universal human experience there is. And you can grieve and grow simultaneously. You can miss what's gone and still move forward. You can honor the past while opening to the future. You can carry loss without letting it define your entire existence. This is upekkha, equanimity, the ability to remain present and balanced even as things change, even as you lose, even as nothing stays the way you wish it would. Not because you don't care, but because you care deeply and you understand that caring doesn't require clinging. Loss is not your enemy. It's your teacher in the most essential truth there is. Nothing is permanent. Everything is precious. And the way you respond to endings shapes who you become more than the endings themselves ever could. And this understanding that loss is teacher, not enemy, brings us to the most powerful practice of all, the one that anchors everything. After everything we've explored together, impermanence, resistance, detachment, not knowing, loss, it all comes down to this. The only moment you actually have power in is this one. Right now. Not 5 minutes from now, when you've figured out your response to what I'm saying. Not tomorrow, when conditions might be better. Not once you've healed completely, or understood everything, or become the person you think you should be. Now, this breath, this heartbeat, this exact moment where life is actually happening. Everything else is story. The past is memory, important, formative, but not happening anymore. It exists only in how you remember it. And memory is selective, changeable, colored by present emotion. The future is imagination, necessary for planning, but not real yet. It exists only as possibility, and possibility shifts with every choice you make in the present. Only now is real. Only now can you actually do anything, feel anything, be anything. And yet, how rarely are you actually here? Your mind is almost always somewhere else, replaying yesterday's conversation, rehearsing tomorrow's meeting, planning next week, regretting last year. It takes tremendous courage to stay here, in the present moment, especially when the present moment is uncomfortable. That's why the mind escapes. When now feels difficult, when there's pain, uncertainty, boredom, discomfort, the mind flees to past or future, where it feels safer, more in control, less vulnerable. But here's the paradox. The only place you can actually handle what's difficult is right here, right now. When you're lost in worrying about tomorrow, you're not actually solving tomorrow's problems. You're just creating suffering today. When you're caught in regret about yesterday, you're not actually changing what happened. You're just preventing yourself from being available to what's happening now. There's a Zen story that captures the essence of presence perfectly. A woman is being chased by a tiger through the forest. She runs as fast as she can, but the tiger is gaining on her, its hot breath at her heels. Suddenly, she reaches the edge of a cliff. With no time to think, she grabs a vine growing down the cliff face and swings herself over the edge, hanging in midair. She looks down. At the bottom of the cliff, another tiger waits, mouth open. She looks up. The first tiger paces at the top, reaching its claws toward her. And then she notices something. Two mice, one white and one black, have emerged from a crack in the cliff and are steadily gnawing through the vine she's clinging to. Tiger above, tiger below, mice chewing through her lifeline. And right there, growing from the cliff face within arm's reach, is a wild strawberry, perfectly ripe, glistening in the sunlight. She plucks it. She eats it. How sweet it tastes. This is presence. Not the absence of danger or difficulty or mortality. Not waiting until everything is safe before you allow yourself to experience the moment. But the willingness to taste the strawberry even while tigers wait and the vine frays, to be fully here with what's beautiful, what's real, what's available right now, even when the circumstances are impossible. Presence isn't about making pain disappear. It's about being willing to feel without fleeing, to stay open even when it's hard, to meet this moment exactly as it is, instead of demanding it be different first. The Buddha taught something called the 4 foundations of mindfulness, Satipatthana, in the original language. They're deceptively simple. Awareness of body, awareness of feelings, awareness of mind states, awareness of the nature of experience itself. But simple doesn't mean easy. To be aware of your body means actually feeling it, the weight of your feet on the ground, the rise and fall of your breath, the tension in your shoulders, the beating of your heart. Most of the time, you live completely disconnected from your body, experiencing life only through the filter of thought, missing all the direct, immediate information your body offers about what's actually happening. To be aware of feelings means noticing pleasant, unpleasant, or neutral sensations as they arise, without immediately reacting to them or building stories around them. To be aware of mind states means observing when your mind is calm or agitated, focused or scattered, open or contracted, without judging yourself for whatever you find. And to be aware of the nature of experience means seeing directly how everything arises and passes, how nothing stays, how even your sense of self is constantly shifting. This is right mindfulness, samasati, the seventh step of the Eightfold Path. Not a vague instruction to be present, but a specific practice of bringing attention to what's actually happening, moment by moment, with curiosity instead of judgment. The simplest, most powerful practice is conscious breathing. Not special breathing, not complicated breathing, just noticing the breath that's already happening. Breath is always present tense. You can't breathe yesterday's breath or tomorrow's breath. You can only breathe this one, right now. So when your mind is spinning in past or future, bringing attention to your breath is an instant return to now. Feel the cool air entering your nostrils. Feel your chest and belly expand. Feel the pause at the top of the inhale. Feel the warm air leaving your body. Feel the stillness at the bottom of the exhale before the next breath begins. This is samatha, calm, abiding, peace that comes not from perfect circumstances, but from being fully present with what is. And within that calm presence, vipassana arises, clear seeing, insight into the nature of things. You start to notice patterns you couldn't see when you were lost in reactivity. You start to recognize choices you didn't know you had. You start to see that between stimulus and response, there's a space, and in that space lies your freedom. The Buddha said, "The past is already gone. The future is not yet here. There's only one moment for you to live, and that is the present moment." This isn't a poetic metaphor. It's literally true. The miracle you've been waiting for, the peace, the clarity, the sense of being okay, it's not hiding in some future achievement or past version of yourself. It's available right here, right now, in your willingness to simply be present with what is. Your body is the anchor that keeps you here. When your mind wanders, your body is always in the present, offering you a way back. Feel your feet on the floor. Feel the weight of your body where you're sitting or lying. Feel your hands, your face, the movement of air against your skin. This isn't mystical or complicated. It's just being awake to the actual experience of being alive instead of lost in thought about being alive. Mindfulness without the buzzword is simple. Wake up to your life. Stop living 5 minutes ahead or 5 years behind. Stop treating this moment as an obstacle to get through, so you can reach the next one. This moment is your life. Not the accumulation of moments, not the story you'll tell later, but this, right here, right now, exactly as it is. Even the mundane moments are sacred when you're actually present for them. The coffee you drink without tasting because you're scrolling through your phone. The walk from your car to the door that you don't remember because your mind was somewhere else. The conversation you had with someone while thinking about what you'd say next instead of actually listening. How much of your life are you missing because you're not actually here for it? And here's what changes everything. You can practice metta, loving, kindness, right here in the present moment. Not just as a formal meditation, but as a way of relating to yourself and this moment with gentleness instead of judgment. Right now, exactly as you are, you can whisper to yourself, "May I be at peace. May I be free from suffering. May I meet this moment with kindness." And you can extend that to everything. May all beings be at peace. May all beings be free from suffering. This isn't abstract philosophy. This is how you actually live the teachings, by bringing them into each ordinary moment, by practicing presence, not someday when conditions are perfect, but right now, right here, with whatever's actually happening. As we come close to the end of our time together, I want to leave you with something practical, something you can carry into your days. You don't need to remember everything we've talked about. You don't need to implement it all perfectly. Let what resonates stay with you. Let what doesn't fit right now fall away. Your heart knows what it needs to keep. Here are some simple daily anchors, not rigid rules, but gentle invitations to practice. In the morning, before you reach for your phone or your to-do list, take 3 conscious breaths and set an intention. May I meet this day with presence. May I be kind to myself and others. May I remember that I'm enough, exactly as I am. Throughout the day, when you notice resistance rising, when something isn't going your way, when you're fighting what is, pause. Notice the tightness in your body. Take a breath. Soften just a little. You don't have to stop resisting completely. Just notice that you're doing it and see if you can soften even 1 degree. That's the practice. Not perfection, but awareness and gentle adjustment over and over. Practice detachment in action by holding your plans lightly. Make your plans, do your work, care about outcomes, but hold them loosely enough that when things change, you can adapt without feeling like everything is falling apart. Practice presence in mundane moments. When you wash the dishes, feel the warm water, notice the soap bubbles. Be there for the simple task instead of rushing through it to get to something supposedly more important. When you walk, actually walk. Feel each foot touching the ground. Notice your surroundings. Be in your body instead of lost in thought. Practice right speech and right action in small choices. Before you speak, pause and ask, Is this true? Is this kind? Is this necessary? Before you act, check your intention. Am I doing this from presence or reaction? From wisdom or impulse? From care or from fear? The practice is returning, not never leaving. You will get lost in thought 1,000 times. You will forget to be present. You will react instead of respond. You will cling when you meant to release. That's not failure. That's being human. The practice is simply noticing when you've wandered and choosing to come back again and again with gentleness toward yourself. Every breath is a chance to begin again. Every moment is an opportunity to choose presence over distraction, kindness over judgment, trust over control. You don't have to be perfect at this. You just have to keep practicing, keep returning, keep choosing awareness when you remember to choose it. And remember, you're not walking this path alone. We practice together, thousands of us, scattered across the world, all working with the same struggles, all learning to be present, to let go, to trust the flow. Your evolution is already happening. Not when you finally get it all right, but right now, in every moment, you choose awareness over autopilot, kindness over cruelty, presence over escape. The river of your life continues flowing even when you can't see where it's going. Trust the process. Trust that you're on the path, even when the path is unclear. Trust that every step matters, even the ones that feel like missteps. And now, let's come home together. Take a breath with me. Feel your body where you are. Notice that you're here, alive, still breathing, after everything you've been through. These past 3 hours were not small. You stayed. You listened. You opened yourself to these teachings. Let them touch something real in you. That takes courage. And I want you to know you can come back to this anytime you need it. This isn't a one-time thing. This is here whenever you need the reminder, whenever you need to hear again that you're not broken, that you're exactly where you need to be, that the path unfolds beneath your feet even when you can't see the whole journey. If it feels right, share what resonated with you. What's one thing you're ready to release? What understanding landed in a way that might change how you move forward? You don't have to share, but know that this community is here. We're walking together, supporting each other, reminding each other of the truths we sometimes forget. You're not alone in this path. If this brought you even a moment of peace, even a breath of relief, I'll be here with more. This work continues, and I'm honored to walk alongside you. Let's take one final breath together. Breathe in. May I be peaceful. Breathe out. May I be free from suffering. Breathe in. May I trust the flow of my life. Breathe out. May all beings find peace. The Buddha taught something simple and profound. Peace comes from within. Do not seek it without. Everything you've been looking for is already here, in your capacity to be present, in your willingness to keep showing up, in your courage to feel and heal and grow, even when it's hard. Until we meet again, dear friend, trust the flow. You're exactly where you need to be. The path unfolds beneath your feet, one breath at a time, one moment at a time, one choice at a time. And that's enough. More than enough. If you need more peace like this, I'm here. And so is this community. We walk together